So a number of years ago, like maybe 10 or more, I was having this really busy week, and I was running around with my 4 kids, and I was working a full-time job, and I stopped by my house really quick to pick up a couple of things before I had to go run and pick up the kids from school and then return back to church for a meeting that night. And I walked into the house, and my 2 dogs at the time, they were going crazy. They were jumping around, barking, and that's when I heard the fire alarm had been going off in my house. So I could hear that the fire alarm was going off in the basement. So then I walked my way down to the basement and I turned the corner, and that's when I saw it. The pipe had burst and water had fallen straight into the basement all day long when we were gone. The ceiling of the basement was on the ground. Everything was soaked, destroyed. The walls, the drywall was starting to swell up and come off of the walls. And this is why the dogs were freaking out probably all day. You ever had this in your life where you have one plan for how your day is going to go? You have one vision for how this week is going to go. Then all of a sudden, something happens and you end up entirely in another direction. Today, we're going to talk about how to stay centered in the new year. For most of us, as we move into the new year, one of our goals is sort of to have a balanced life. You know, like a balanced day where you found yourself, you had purpose through the day, and then you got enough sleep through the evening. You ate enough healthy food and managed to exercise, but get your work done. You manage your time well. We want to keep balance. We want to keep these routines in our life. Maybe some of you have managed to do that, and I applaud you for that. But yet for all of us, in one way or another, we have something that can completely come into our days and just throw us completely for a loop. I was at a leadership conference not too long ago. It was a church leadership conference, and the pastor got up and started talking about all the expectations that the church puts on church leaders today. Started listing all these expectations, but then he started talking about how you can live your best life. He started saying, well, what you have to do is you have to work in the correct zone for your life. And the whole time he's talking about delegating and saying no and prioritizing and hiring more staff, or all the things that you could do to fix the unbalance of having too big of a job of your time. And the whole time I sat there and I thought, I really would like to optimize my time. But then I thought, does this guy even have kids? Does this guy even have a pet or a house where something can just derail at any moment? When he's working in his zone, who's taking care of all of those other things? Probably his wife or his partner. Or does he make enough money to keep all of the things balanced and going? Probably. He's speaking at this big conference. But what about for the rest of us? What about for the rest of us? What do we do in our lives when things go just off balance? When things kind of get messed up during the day, when the kid's school calls and says that we need to go pick them up because they're not feeling well, even though we have a very important meeting. You see, I think if you even do manage just a second of balance, there's always something right there on the edge to push you right out of it. Like an unexpected illness or some bad news, or even maybe a bad day or a car accident that makes you late, or a tough conversation with a loved one, or the pipe breaks in the basement ceiling and water is rushing down into your house. How do we still manage to achieve some level of peace in the midst of all the things that go on in the course of a day, in the course of a week, in the course of a year, in the course of a life? You see, here's what I think. I actually think that being balanced is a lie. If you bought books that say how to be balanced in the new year, I would say just go ahead and throw them out right now. I mean, you can work hard and train and go to bed at the same time every night, but the phone still might ring and your sister might call to tell you something bad about going on with your nephew. You see, you could choose not to answer it, or you can just understand that life balance is a lie. So instead, in our new year and new you, I'm going to offer you an alternative perspective, another way of looking at how to keep your days going. Instead of looking for balance, I'm going to suggest that we look for centeredness, that no matter what storm or struggle comes on, no matter what change or challenge happens in your life, that you find yourself centered and rooted in the grace and love of God. And maybe that's where our peace comes from. Here's the centered alternative for the new year, new you. Number one, we can center ourselves that our worth is not dependent on our productivity. God makes it very clear that how you are, your worth is not dependent on anything that you do in your lives, but your worth is fully centered on what God thinks of you. God says, my grace is made sufficient for you. Power is made through weakness. Think about it a bit. You wouldn't tell somebody who was a baby or somebody who struggled with a diagnosis like dementia or Alzheimer's that they didn't have any worth because they weren't productive, because that's ridiculous, right? Our worth is not dependent on our productivity, and we can stay centered on that. And the second thing is that you actually do control your time. You really do. And if you read scripture, you'll see that Jesus is never hurrying his way through it. Sometimes I think that the rushing that we do in this modern life, it's something that we are doing in here. We're working through all of our problems and we're rushing it and feeling it in our bodies rather than letting our bodies control the time around us. I appreciate what we can learn from other cultures when it comes to us controlling our time. Whenever I travel to Africa, people, they show up when they show up. Time is not centered on something that they're trying to control. Instead, they are responsible for that. So what if this year, instead of trying to be balanced, you try to be centered on God's love, knowing that whatever happens in a day, a week, a month, and a year, that God is fully present with you in it. You don't have to rush. You don't have to hustle. You can be centered. Ephesians puts it this way. It says, and I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how high and deep and wide is the love of Christ, and knowing that this love surpasses all knowledge, that you can be filled to the measure, I love that, with the fullness of God. So in 2024, may you not strive to be balanced, but may you rest centered in the love of God.